is the Conelrad Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
For 5 years, 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from somewhere along the modern wonder known as the Interstate Highway System, streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim. Today is September 20th, 2023. This is episode 372 of Workshop Radio. We're going to dive right in with a interesting segment. You guys love it, so I'm going to keep keeping on with it. It is I Shit You Not, and tonight we're going to talk about the origin of the phrase driving shotgun. Some of you, or riding shotgun, sorry. Some of you may have heard this before, but it's pretty obvious once you hear it, but it's something, as a kid, we would always just run and holler and say shotgun, and now my daughters have done the same thing. Charlotte and Alice will literally beat each other to within an inch of their life to be able to sit in front, so I don't get it. But anyway, the expression riding shotgun comes from the old term shotgun messenger, a term for express messenger when the stagecoach travel was popular, which makes sense. During the Wild West, you see it in the old movies all the time. This person is the one who would ride right alongside the driver. The first thing, that's awesome. Robin Holstein says, "You're my favorite turd." I appreciate that. The person rode alongside the driver. The phrase was first coined, riding shotgun, in a 1905 novel, The Sunset Trail by Alfred Henry Lewis. Wyatt Earp and Morgan Earp, you guys have heard of them before, were in the service of the Express Company. They went often as guards, riding shotgun, it was called, when the stage bore unusual treasure. I like this. So in the American Old West, this part came from the Wikipedia article. Express messengers of the Wells Fargo Company typically carried a short-barreled or a sawed-off shotgun, typically 12 gauge, sometimes 10 gauge. Could you imagine a sawed-off 10 gauge? Man, if you were within 10 feet of that, heaven help you. Whew. It was a double-barreled shotgun loaded with buckshot. The express messenger typically rode in the seat on top of the coach to the left of the driver, which is kind of interesting, who typically sat on the right, operating the wheel brake with his right arm. Such weapons were sometimes referred to as messenger shotguns, or for those who enjoy the Going Home book series, coach guns. You know, Thad had one of those very effectively. So One Step Closer said you could murder the entire landscape with a 10 gauge. Yeah, you could absolutely do that. Letty Lou says we need to bring riding shotgun back into style. Yeah, we do. Carrying the reins on a stagecoach was typically a two-hand job, but at the least it required one hand. So even the best operator would have a hell of a time trying to operate a long-barreled or even a short-barreled shotgun. So the best they're going to be able to do is a little piddly handgun. So basically, two things about riding shotgun. Number one, the person who is riding shotgun was the person protecting whatever the precious cargo was. Number two, it also became known that if bandits saw a stagecoach that didn't have someone riding shotgun, then they would typically leave it alone because they knew it wasn't worth their time risking getting their neck stretched on a piece of rope when there wasn't somebody riding shotgun. In other words, there wasn't something in there worth possibly dying for. David Sigler says we keep a 12-gauge coach gun in the elevator stand next to the front door. It does say elevator stand, right? Okay. And we used to keep something very similar. Well, actually, we still do, but it's a breakdown shotgun underneath the fold-out futon coach or whatever that's in the back of our hunting camp. So always good. Umbrella. Okay, good. David Sigler said it was actually an umbrella stand. Ted McDonald says congrats on 10K. I was going to end up mentioning that later on. Thank you, brother. It's good to see you. Also good to see Kyle in here. We got a whole bunch of people. And Backwoods Butcher said, or you can just pick up a tourist judge like I have that takes 45 and 410s. Yes, when you're in the glorious land of freedom, a tourist judge is a beautiful thing. Although it's not much of a snake gun, at least if you watch Paul Harrell, he didn't like it a whole lot for that. But if you go north of the border, tourist judges aren't super legal. So there you go. Anyhow, I thought you'd like that. And then my thought, give it a little thought on riding shotgun in today's environment. I mean, yeah, so today, if you're riding shotgun with your family, you're probably in charge of organizing the radio and doing kind of making sure you get the map right. What is this, 1984? The GPS right, that sort of thing. Anyway, but if it were in a grid down or a bug out scenario, you're going to have to be looking ahead for the driver. You're going to have to be watching out for ne'er-do-wells. You're going to be having to navigate, and you're going to have to be defending. So I love it. It's one of them stupid little things that we say all the time that we don't necessarily think about, and it's a fun one to take a dive into. So I hope you enjoyed that segment of I Shit You Not. Let's get the announcements out of the way, and then we'll dive into, I've got a couple of stranger than fiction news articles for you tonight, and then we're going to talk about becoming part of a community or not becoming part of a community. Backwoods Butcher said, had a woman at the grocery store come up to me while I was holding my youngest and say, "Excuse me, do you know your weapon is showing?" Well, you know what? Was she being polite? Because that, man, I could go 100 different directions with that one. So first off, guys, somebody I'm going to see tomorrow when I get to prepper camp is Joel Riles of Fortress K9. So if you are looking to get motivated, if you're looking to hear the story of how he rebuilt his life, give Joel some support. You know, I do not believe, I think competition is healthy for everybody. And I also think that if you are looking for a podcaster or something to put in your ear holes, I'm always going to recommend my friends, people who have supported the workshop. And Joel has been a sponsor. I was going to say subscriber, a sponsor since day one. So give him a shot. FortressK9.com. It's a protection dog podcast, and it's a whole lot more than just dogs. Number 2, guys, patch of the month. I don't want to show you what the new patch looks like yet, but it's been on social. So if you're looking, Chicken Hawk posted it today. I literally threw it in the mail yesterday, and he got it today. The guys in Canada actually got theirs first. So always awesome. It's good when the Canucks can get something first, but the only reason they got it first is because I shipped it to them like 5 days before I shipped the American ones. So there's that. But if you're looking to support the workshop, guys, patchofthemonth.co, $10 a month, $100 a year. If you can, sign up, because I believe in value for value exchange, and that's one way I can give you even more value back every single month. And finally, now that the workshop get-together in Illinois is behind us for this year anyhow, it's time to start talking about the next workshop get-together, and that'll be the Delinquents Gully Workday, the Thursday before Self-Reliance Festival, October 12th. And if you looked at what we did in Illinois and thought, my goodness, it would be really nice to have some of that fellowship, well then come on by if you can make it. There's no cost at all. But just bring a strong back and an open mind, and I promise you we will have lots of time to sit around and chat and share stories. We'll do a recording, and we're going to do our best to get Delinquent Gully at least somewhat habitable for this year. Brian and I are going to start out by building a shitter, and then we're going to clear some kind of parking, and then we're going to clear some paths. And if I can do it, I'm going to build an 8x8 cabin this year. I guess we'll end up seeing. One Step Closer says, do we need to bring any tools to the gully? So, okay, here is, yes, if you can, that would be great. I'm going to have, I don't know what I'm going to, I left everything at home on purpose because I'm going to go to Harbor Freight and build myself a brand new toolkit for down here. I'm going to pick up a chainsaw and some other things. I guess the big thing, if you happen to, and you're close enough by and you can bring a chainsaw, that would be what we would need more than anything. But if we have 1 or 2 people on chainsaws and a bunch of people lugging, that's probably all we're really going to need. But I'll do my best to make sure you're as equipped as you can. 2 reasons. Number 1, I wanted to build something down here that I can leave behind for this year as far as tools go. But number 2, I was slightly concerned about taking a shit ton of tools across the border in a work truck and thinking it may, they may ask me more questions than I'm supposed to be able to answer. You know what it's like anyway. So, and Letty says, I will get you that information, Letty. That would be great. I would love, to have as many people as we can. So I've been kind of holed up here for a couple of days in Louisville. I've been having a good time, just relaxing, kind of getting my bearings together. Yesterday was just laundry, the whole works. I told you about what I was going to do yesterday. It was a nice day to get shit done. Picked up some more stuff for the trip. Today, I had a relaxing day. I did end up venturing out for a little while. I went to a place called the Rec Bar. And if anybody's ever been to it here in Louisville, I guess there's 2 of them. It's about 20 minutes from my hotel. They had like 84 pinball machines. And it's the type of place where you go in, they have a bar. So I had a wonderful old fashioned. They had food, you sit up at the bar and eat food. And then you just buy tokens and play, I think $20. And I played pinball for like 2 hours. So if you're ever looking for something, it was really cool. But so I only have a few thoughts from the road because it's mainly stuff that I've been doing around here recently. But something I tried and it seems to be working good. You know, I have the Yeti cooler. I've been putting the ice. Well, I always fill bags in the ice maker here at the hotel. And then it lasts for as long as it needs to last. But I bought a bunch of heavy duty freezer bags with the zipper top. And so 4 of them, I fill them up in the hotel, throw them in the Yeti, and they seem to last quite a while. But that does 2 things. It keeps the ice from melting and getting down in, well, it's still going to melt, but getting down in on the food, keeps the ice from getting contaminated, and allows me to keep using that ice for an old fashioned or something without risk of it being contaminated from meat or anything that tastes kind of funny. So I did a test. I filled the Yeti on Thursday, the night before I went to Nate and Aaron's, and I didn't empty it until Tuesday. So 5 days, and it was still as cool as it needed to be. The last of the ice was just starting to melt. So if you're looking at Yetis, they do seem to work. Was it an investment? Hell yeah, it was an investment. We got washing machines here at the hotel that have card readers. And you might think, oh, Tim, you're so strange. Yeah, I like technology like that. I hadn't seen one yet because as I was going down to get my laundry done, I was thinking, I got to get quarters. So again, because I'm an anal old man, I got thinking I need to get a roll of quarters and keep them in my go bag as well so that I have quarters to do laundry. I get down there and it has a card reader on it. Hadn't seen one before. So I thought that was pretty cool. If you don't have a good insulated coffee mug, get yourself one of them for traveling. I love it. It's great for coffee. It's good for water. And it's exceptionally good for an old fashioned. I sat out on the deck downstairs drinking an old fashioned and nobody was any of the wiser. But it stirs up really nice, holds it nice and cold until the entire drink's gone. But it's just, you know, whatever you want to think about reusing or getting rid of throwaway cups. But a good vacuum sealed coffee mug is where it's at. And I forgot my workshop one, so I don't have the one to show you, but I bought it at a Love's Truck Stop, put stickers on it, and now it's a Toolman Tim's Workshop coffee mug. I plugged in, I got that 500 watt, it's like a power station. One day on the road with that solar panel gave me just shy of half a charge on there. So of course it's on the back side of the cab, so depending on what direction you're driving, I was driving south, so the exposure to the solar panel was north. So I think it was 41% charge on that, which wasn't bad. And it's just been sitting in the parking lot. It's fully charged now, but it's nice because it's all enclosed and locked in. I was really kind of enjoying that. I have plans of adding more solar panels. The more I use it, the more I like it. I wasn't sure if I would, so I'm definitely going to add one more to double. I'd like to have 100 watts of solar on that back panel. We'll start with that. We'll see where it goes, but it seems to be wasted space. It's free energy. And then, of course, all your small USB devices, I charge them while I'm driving. Because if you're driving and creating energy, you might as well store it into those devices. And talking about AI taking over the world, I pulled into Hardee's the other day, not Harvey's, as in the Canadian store or fast food restaurant, but Hardee's, Hardees. And I roll up, and this very polite voice says, "Hey, may I take your order, please?" And I'm like, that sounds like a robot or like AI. Sure enough, it was. There's a little sign that says, "Please be patient. We have a robot in training." And artificial intelligence took my order at Hardee's. And to be honest, it wasn't frustrating at all. And it was probably less frustrating than your typical interaction with a human trying to listen through a speaker. So for whatever reason or for whatever it's worth, I enjoyed the first experience of an AI taking my order. So there you go. All right. I got, let's see if we can bring this up here, guys. I saved you, I got a couple of articles tonight about, let's see if we can bring this up. A couple of wildfire articles that I wanted to share with. We're going to skim through them fairly quick, but one's about a guy who built a cabin and it burnt down, and the other one is about how an electric vehicle isn't the best, what do you want to call it? Bug out vehicle, I guess we'll call it. Rachel says, where did you find a Hardee's? I only know of one in PA. Well, this one is in Louisville, Kentucky, so a little ways away. So this guy here, his name's Murray Frank. He is a builder. He spent 3 years constructing his family's legacy cabin. It was supposed to be something that would last 4 generations. And it was almost finished and it burnt to the ground. He runs a company called Building It Right. And an award, anyway, we'll go on from there. He said it was an amazing opportunity for us to know more and perhaps be even greater resistance to wildfires. So this place burnt down and the dude has a great attitude about it. It sucks that it happens, but he wants to learn from it to try to build it better next time. But he said Frank has hired a fire investigative team from Calgary to examine the cabin once evacuation orders have been lifted. As you guys know, up in Canada, we've been dealing with wildfires constantly. 2 or 3 days ago, Becky still had a ton of smoke in our community. I've had enough of that for this year. That's all I can say. It really sucks. The cabin's construction was featured in an educational series on how to build a net zero home. So he was trying to build it green or whatever. But for him, the big thing was this. Hey, John Palmer, this was going to be a cabin, a living space, kind of a generational legacy for his family, and it wasn't quite finished and it burnt down. So he followed federal fire resilient building codes set out for places like his town. And he said, the building scientist in me realizes this is the first opportunity we've had to put all the common knowledge and current thinking of fire resiliency into the build. So here's the thing, the dude, his entire business is building houses and building net zero houses, building things that are meant to last for generations. He more than exceeded both what the government says and what is recommended from some other organizations. And he still ended up out of the, out of his property, burn up. And so if you guys remember back to when I had George Siegel on there from the Last House Standing, there was a dude from California who did custom fire suppression systems. And that is the type of thing that would have caused this building to end up sticking around. So Frank said building a fire safe home includes using fire resistant cladding and roofing materials, as well as ensuring there aren't any openings bigger than 3 millimeters that could draw in embers. The cabin also adhered to the province's Fire Smart guidelines, he said, which included tactics like removing flammable materials from the area immediately around the home. And this is one of those stories that I wanted to share. Here's the aerial view. You can see where the cabin's left. He had remote cameras that helped show him part of what went on. And when it comes down to it, I mean, you can see there was a lot of trees right up against the property. And again, they always say plans of mice and men, no matter how much we prepare, there's always the chance that shit can still go sideways. This dude did everything he could, and his poor cabin still burnt to the ground. Now, was there more he could have done? Sure, but he thought he met or exceeded all that he ever needed to do. He did all the things we say. He tried to cut down any, underbrush, anything that would be dry, tried to kind of limit the exposure to anything tinder. He made everything nice and tight, made metal roof, the whole works. And as you can see, all that's left is the metal roof on the ground and the structure is gone. He said, we actually brought in a professional forester to help reduce the amount of material and fuel sources, at least to the extent of our lot, Frank said. And as you can see around there, I don't know if you can see, but there was still a ton of tinder and trees that burnt, but just around the edge, there was other trees that didn't burn. So it looks like it moved fairly quick that some trees didn't. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think a person could have done more, but it's interesting to see how this kind of thing happens. Even the experts try and it doesn't always happen. Here's what the interior of that beautiful cabin looked like. The building's exterior was completed, he said. just plumbing and interior finish and a little bit of electrical for alarms and internet. Completion was set for October. He said, I think with our house, the challenge that we had was the intensity of the fire. It was hot and it was quick moving. Anyway, the further remote you get and the closer you get into the woods, you're increasing the risk of being caught in a wildfire, says an expert. Yeah, no shit. The more you want to move away from society and live in the woods, there is times, he says right here, you want to be out in nature, but nature can turn on you. Yep, yes, it can. Weisner said provincial and federal smart fire guidelines are meant to help prevent catastrophic damage to homes, but there's only so much that can be done in case of a raging wildfire. You can reduce the risk to a certain point, but you cannot completely eliminate it. So what I liked about some of these other solutions I've seen, some of those custom fire suppression systems, those are the way. The one that was built in the hills in, I guess it was near Hollywood in Los Angeles. Basically, he had an in-ground pond there, huge amount of water storage that he was able to pump up into the air, and they made the air surrounding the property so humid that fire couldn't happen. Now, I guess it depends on if you throw enough money at a scenario, you're going to be able to eliminate 99% of the risk. But this dude did everything. This guy exceeded more than anyone else who builds in the woods, short of having a custom fire suppression system, and it still ended up burning down. Hunter says, yep, and nature does not give a single F care about anyone, and that's what ends up happening. That's exactly it. I guess okay. The guy did a few things. He wasn't living there, but if he were, I'm sure he would have bugged out. He would have left, because this is one of the scenarios where if you bug in, you're an idiot. And hopefully, if you ended up dealing with something like this, a person would have a backup plan as well, because that's what you need. Even if, like I say most of the time, 95 to 99% of the time, person's going to bug in for most scenarios. This is one where you're not, and you need to have a backup plan. And this guy's going to go back, and when I find out the follow-up, I will tell you a little bit more. But yeah, no matter how hard you try to make things fireproof, sometimes nature just has another plan. So this next one should be a good one. I'm hoping it gets people riled up just a little bit. But something I don't think I haven't mentioned. I mean, okay, you guys know where my stance is on EVs. I definitely have no interest in it being our only vehicle, but I would love to have a second vehicle as an EV. We actually looked at a Hyundai, can't remember what brand it was, but just recently we had looked at an SUV for Becky. Her use case for an electric EV would have been 100% perfect, but we decided not to because it was super expensive. So we're still on internal combustion, and we have no problem with that at all. John Palmer says, they sell stuff made out of the stuff in diapers you can spray in your home, which makes it almost fireproof. Yes, I forgot about that. This guy I talked to about custom fire suppression, he had mentioned that it's a fireproof gel that you can buy that you basically spray all over your building, and it lasts for a couple of days. And yeah, that's exactly it. It's just like the little gel pellets that are inside of diapers. So this is an interesting, as you guys know, I saved these two stories because they kind of fit together in a theme, but we've been fighting wildfires like crazy. And this one is actually up north, fairly close to where Santa Claus lives, even closer than where I live to Santa Claus. So there you go. So this is an op-ed piece from Jamela Hagen. And her title, for those on the audio, says, we like our electric vehicle because it's green, but for escaping wildfires, maybe it's not the best option yet. Robin Holstein, and yeah, I know EVs are something that get everybody riled up and it's fun. Robin says, yeah, an EV would be a nice second car, a run downtown car, but give me internal combustion for real power in the truck. Yes, exactly. That's exactly how I feel. I'd love to have, Becky drives to and from work, which is like, 2 blocks most days. Sometimes she even walks. Rarely we'll drive to the city, which is 300 kilometers. So 200 miles or something like that. And then we would have access to a charger overnight. So use case scenario would be absolutely perfect. And what I do like about them right here, one step closer, says EVs would be a great backup battery idea for a home solar system if they weren't so darned expensive? Yes. And when I was looking at the Hyundai SUV, can't remember the name of it right now, it had dual flow battery backup. So you could pull from the grid or you could feed back to your house. And I like that. And yeah, that's the problem. And what ends up needing to happen for this kind of shit is the market needs to do what the market does. They need to keep coming up with new innovations and eventually bringing the price down, because as we know, government subsidies really don't work, even though they like to think they do. Just ends up pushing the cost over to someone else. And right now, basically the uptake on electric vehicles has flatlined because all the early adopters and the people who like the idea of the government subsidies, they've spent their money. Now everybody else is like, I don't want to buy a vehicle that's, 20 to 50% more money. So yeah, there we are. So here we are. This is an interesting story. This is a miserable story, actually. So the charging infrastructure has a long way to go before it can compete with gas stations. Yep, in a crisis. Sorry. So this is something we don't talk about a whole lot. And this is electric vehicles in a crisis. And I've thought about that before. I always thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Byron Roberts says, I'm expecting delivery of an EV, a Chevy Bolt tomorrow for our IT department. Interesting. I can't wait to hear what your thoughts are on it, Byron. And if they're the type that will go, if they're the type that's just going out to do service and back and forth, it'd be ideal for that. And Backwoods says, there are a handful of EVs up here. He's up in New England. And he says, I don't understand how they are making it anywhere. And that is what it comes down to. I always thought for EVs, one of the big downsides would be bugging out during a hurricane for evacuation. And then I got thinking, I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Most people don't keep their damn gas tank full anyway. And if they wanted to, you're still going to have to stop and wait in long lines to get gas, which is true. However, here's the difference. Gas stations are plentiful. They're around every corner, and you can drive just a little ways and get more. And when you finally find a gas station that you can get gas, you can have 400 to 500 miles of range in 5 minutes, whereas that's not the case with electric at the best of times. So this really shows the flaws of using an EV at the moment for a bug out scenario. All right. She said, dusk gives way to darkness as my boyfriend and I drove up a brushy highway toward Prince George, toward our home in Whitehorse. When I saw a red glow on the horizon to the right, at first I thought we were approaching a town, but something seemed off. It was too intense. Then it dawned on me, no shit, there's a wildfire. If you guys know how remote this land is, if you were heading up there, these guys were doing a 2 or 3 day road trip, why the hell you wouldn't be aware of the fact that there's a fire? As she says, how could I have forgotten about it? It wasn't just any wildfire. It was the biggest one ever recorded in British Columbia. John says, put a gas generator in the truck. There you go. Said, as we continued to drive beside the eerie glow of the wildfire, I thought about how fortunate we were that at least part of our country had avoided the wildfires this year. I didn't know anyone who had lost a home, yada, yada, yada. My heart went out to everyone whose lives were changed. Sure, yes. And she said, as I was starting to get tired, I realized I needed something that a gas station could get me. I need a Coca-Cola to perk myself up. She said, I also need to clean my bug-coated windshield, and I needed to take a pee. But on this trip, stopping at a gas station didn't even make sense. Why? Because I was driving an electric vehicle. Grant and I were on a 4-day road trip to bring his new electric pickup truck from Vancouver back to our home in Whitehorse. He works in renewable energy, and earlier this summer, when his gas vehicle died, he felt it was worth the financial stretch to switch to electric. I've been EV curious for a while. That is such a weird term. I don't know. There's so many connotations. But as a single mom who works part-time, I can't afford an EV myself. That's why I jumped at the chance to help him break up the more than 2,500 kilometer journey north and test out the driving of the EV. Here's the thing. This is where she says, I knew there'd be challenges. There are gaps between fast chargers on both highways to the Yukon. Okay, that's the first two things. So here we're gonna play the game of the mistakes that were made. First mistake, not paying attention to the wildfires. Second issue, maybe not mistake, that there's gaps between fast chargers on the way up. They knew they were going to have to deal with that. Distances between gas stations in Canada's north can also be quite vast. But we couldn't just strap. Here it is. And here's the issues, because you guys know I'm pro EV in certain instances, probably a lot more than a lot of people in the prepper sphere. So this time we couldn't just strap a couple of jerry cans to the outside of our vehicle and go for it, because jerry cans don't help you if you run out of charge, unless of course you got a generator on your roof, right? So we carefully planned a trip through the Fraser Canyon up that. They were going to stop at RV campsites, which they were told have plugs powerful enough to charge an EV at the same speed as level 2 chargers. Byron Roberts says the Yukon and an electric vehicle sounds like a bad combo. Yes, it does. This is what I'm thinking. It sounds like this is his main vehicle too. You've got a few combinations up there that make me slightly nervous. Now, the Yukon itself does pull a lot of power with, I think, a direct link between British Columbia and the Yukon, but a lot of the up north power is generated through diesel generators. So that's a whole nother kettle of fish we're not going to talk about tonight. But you're talking about remote locations, long distances between chargers, very, very cold temperatures, and an unreliable power grid. I wouldn't want that as my only vehicle. Let's put it that way. Backwood says, I'm not anti-EV, but we'll never own one. We've had enough issues with my wife's hybrid. Fair enough. Said this time, yeah, anyway, we got that part. RV campsites were as good as level 2 chargers. So again, when I read these stories about road trips of electric vehicles, people plan on the best case scenario, but what ends up happening is real life happens and it's nowhere near as good as it should be. So Byron Roberts says level 2 chargers are 30 amps, same as a lot of RV plugs. That's good to know. What we hadn't planned were for the fires. Here we go. Our choice to drive an EV was an attempt to reduce our personal impact. It was a personal impact on climate change. Anyway, you guys know where I stand on this entire thing. I'm not worried about this, but I do like some of the technology coming out of EV, out of electric vehicles. So let's move on. Before we even left the Yukon, our preferred southern route was shut down due to wildfires. Okay, there's number 3. You've got a road that's been shut down. So we decided to go through the Aquila. I don't know what I can't ever pronounce it anyway. But shortly after that, that was shut down as well. In the end, we chose to drive through Pemberton, BC. So after our flight landed in Vancouver, we started driving north under smoke-filled skies. We were forced to change our plans yet again because a fire had jumped the highway near the Yukon border. The last change of routes was the hardest. We had booked a hotel and 2 RV sites on our route, and now we had to divert to the Alaska Highway, which we had heard had an 894-kilometer gap. We're going to call that 600 miles. 600 miles between level 3 chargers. Crazy. We didn't know how to get through it in time to make it to our work and parenting commitments that loom 2 days away. Now, they have work and parenting commitments. Cool. That sucks. I get it. But think about how much more stressful this would be if you knew that your life and limb depended on the fact that you needed to get out of Dodge because of a wildfire. In a mild panic, I posted to the Yukon EV Facebook group, which is cool. She reached out to community. That's what I would do too if I were in a situation like that. Asking for information on where to charge, knowing we could soon lose cell service on the upcoming stretch of highway. They came back with charge times, the whole work. In Prince George, the level 3 charger was slower than I expected. There's another issue. Even though you were counting on certain charge times, you weren't going to get it. The charging station also had no windshield washers like most gas stations do, which meant we had to drive to the next stretch of smoke-filled skies and reduced visibility with a windshield full of bugs. And it's probably the old man in me, but I hate windshields full of bugs. In pitch darkness with only 62 kilometers left of remaining driving charge, we gratefully slept in our truck while it charged, only to find at lunchtime the next day a level 2 charger was even slower than it was supposed to be, and we'd have to spend another night after only traveling about 200 miles. We had no choice but to wait for the full charge because the vehicle does have a full range of 500 kilometers. The distance between us and the next level 3 charger was 513 kilometers on a hilly, windy road. So they had longer to go than they had range available. So they booked the hotel, plugged the truck into a charger. Listen to this, guys. This is the type of stuff, just keep it in mind. And, you know, I'm not anti-EV, but we booked a hotel, plugged the truck into the charger, then had to walk 20 minutes back to their hotel on a road without sidewalks to get where we were staying. And in fact, this wasn't unusual. She was also surprised to find that EV chargers were often located in inconvenient places, such as the edge of towns, behind buildings, or at a far side of box store parking lots. Another thing to think of. She said if she was traveling as a single woman, she would have found herself missing the comfort of a brightly lit gas station on a lonely stretch of highway. We had lunch and then worked on our laptops. We had dinner with friends who happened to be passing by because they were in a fuel-powered vehicle. All in all, it took 22 hours to charge their truck. So basically 24 hours to charge their truck where they were staying. On their final day of travel, they made it home to their hometown with 39 kilometers to spare. As we pulled into another charger, again, it was in an awkward location off the highway. I wondered how long it would take before northern EV drivers could reliably find places to plug right in the center of town. Yep, and there it is. You're creating, in this instance, I need to say this. This dude, this woman are creating their own issues. They're taking an electric vehicle where an electric vehicle shouldn't be. They want to be a trailblazer. I get it, but you're going to end up paying for this. And this was a miserable sounding scenario, if you ask me. That's all I got to say about that. But if this doesn't show to you why an electric vehicle isn't the proper bug out vehicle yet, and it may, I don't know. Okay, here's my thoughts. I want a gas vehicle if I need to get her to Dodge because shit's going sideways. 100% I want a gas vehicle, and I want 3 or 4 jerry cans in the box of the truck. However, two things, and there's probably more, but 2 things that I really, really like about EVs that we downplay are the ability to use the power stored in your vehicle as backup power for your home. I like that. And number 2, the ability to add, hey, yes, Brian, good to have you on here. Food Forest Farms, hybrid. And I've heard good things. Like Kyle said, he's had trouble with his hybrid, but there are some hybrids out there that are kind of cool, distance and mileage. So here we go. The other thing is, in a worst case scenario, you're not going to be able to make any more gasoline. But in a worst case scenario, if you've got some solar panels on your roof at your home, you're going to be able to put a small charge into a vehicle or into a small electric bike or something like that. And that's where it comes down to, is that it's not a black or white. It's not a yin or a yang or whatever kind of scenario with EVs. Everything has its place, and I just want us to be a little bit open-minded. But I can tell you a place that EVs shouldn't be right now, and that's in the Yukon. So enough said, right? Not designed for snow. Fair enough. I get you. So let's dive in to, I actually had a lot prepared for tonight's show, so I hope you guys stick with me because I'm really enjoying it. Hey, Ian, Claire, e-bikes rock. Yes, let's talk about those a little bit. I just spoke to a gentleman at the workshop get together there at Nate and Aaron's place, and he had an incredible electric assist pedal bike that had great range. It was only, I think he said around $1,500, and the thing looked like it was built like a brick shithouse, and had is that right? The right term? Maybe not hot swappable, but had swappable batteries. So you didn't even it wasn't something built into it. So if you needed to have a second battery, you just slapped it on there and pulled it off. And I love that. I would love that. There's these little fold-up ones that Costco sells right now for around 400 Canadian. There's a Filipino lady in my town who works at A&W and lives across town, and she rides that everywhere. Now, again, you're not going to be wanting to ride that in the middle of winter on our roads because we might scrape them, but we leave ice on the roads. But for 9 months of the year, 8 months of the year, it's really good. My daughter had an electric scooter quite a few years ago, ran off battery before she had her license. And she ditched it in November because they're not great on snow and ice. Let's put it that way. So yeah. All right. I cannot remember who brought this up, but there was a great conversation in the Telegram group. And quick plug, guys, if you're listening to this and you're not in the Telegram group, please come by and join us. I think we got 225 members over there. It's an awesome community. I love it. But if you want to share what you know or be told what you don't know, no, I'm just kidding. If you're looking for information or just want to become part of the delinquent community, come by and join it. Doesn't cost you anything. If you're not typically using Telegram, it's worth using Telegram just to hang out with all the cool kids over there. So anyway, somebody had mentioned the other day about how they had moved to a new town because they wanted to get out of the city and they wanted to come into a community that was more conducive to, I'm going to guess, I'm inferring that it was maybe a post-collapse scenario is what they were thinking. Doesn't matter. They just wanted to get out of the cities because cities suck donkey balls in general, right? They're nice to visit, but they're not a good place to live for the most part. Now, if you live there and you want to stay, I'm not going to judge you. So let me tell you a little story. A couple of years ago, there was a guy in my not my hometown. See, I'm going to use those words interchangeably. A guy in the town I live in now. I've lived there for 10 years. His name is Sam. Great guy, was Sam. He ran Provost hardware store. And we used to joke that someday somebody would come in and find him, passed away at his stool behind the desk because he was there all the time. He was part of the furniture. He was part of the fabric of the town of Provost. He had been there. He had moved there with his wife in the early 80s. He'd been there 40 years. He'd been a pillar of the community and a part of everything around him. And when he passed away, the first thing that was listed in his obituary was that he had come from away. In Nova Scotia, where I grew up, no matter how long you live somewhere, people always say, oh, he comes from away. And that is exactly what ends up happening. So even though Sam had been there for 40 years, his entire adult life, he was still considered as from away. Didn't mean he wasn't part of the community. It just meant he wasn't born in the community. There was a lady I talked to at Home Hardware many, many years ago. She used to begrudge. She said she knew people who had lived in our town since they were 15, 16 years old, and they were in their 80s. And she always used to say, the minute they die, everybody will say, oh yeah, she came from away. I tell you this story to let you know that, there's certain connections that people who are born in the town share. You have this kind of shared ethos or shared background. You have certain things that you all have in common, okay? So if you move to a town after, childhood, you're never going to be, there's going to be a bit of a connection missing, but it doesn't mean you can't become part of the community. We talk let's go way back. You guys seem to really love my history of modern preparedness, a series that I've put together. So the second episode, I talked about the term retreater. And that was Don and Mel Stevens. They wrote the book on retreating, literally. So the earliest prepper movement post-World War II was exactly that. Get out of the city, get out of the city, get out of the city. Where have we heard it before? Jack Spirko's harped it for many years. I talk about it. Everybody talks. Everybody in the prepper movement knows that cities are a bad place to be. So we push it, we talk about it, and people are like, hey, I need to move out of the city. However, once they move to a small town, you do your due diligence and try to find the place where you're supposed to live. And all of a sudden you get there and you're like, ooh, this isn't the sunshine and roses I thought. And when I wave to my new neighbor and they turn the other way, or they gossip about me, or, I can't get a seat at the local restaurant, or whatever it happens to be, you think, damn it, did I make the right move? It can be tough, guys. I've been on both sides of the coin. I've lived in a town until I was 32. I was from there my entire life, and I dealt with a ton of people who came from away, some of whom I legitimately turned my nose up to, which I know, and other people who fit in really, really well. And it's a tough scenario. Let me give you two examples. So first, there was a family who moved to my hometown where I lived, and they were from Newfoundland. So even though Nova Scotia is very similar to Newfoundland, they're totally different at the same time, okay? I know. Anyway, people like to call me a Newfie in Alberta, and they know it gets under my skin. So this family was from Newfoundland, and they were very boisterous and outgoing, and they really assumed a lot. And what ended up getting under everybody's skin was that they thought they were everybody's best friend, and they treated everybody like they'd known them their entire life, and that they had, that they just knew them, and, oh, you should like me because I'm likable. And what ended up happening was they never ever assimilated into the town, because they assumed right away that because they knew everybody in their hometown, that everybody was going to like them in the town that they moved to. They made the mistake. Now, the next people, a guy named Nigel, I thought the world of. He was, I might be wrong about this. I think he was from Wales, somewhere where they have a British accent. I'm pretty sure it's Wales, but I might be wrong about that. And he used to come into Home Hardware all the time. And he bought a property in my hometown, and he was most definitely from away. But you know what he did? He would come in, and he would shoot the shit with us, and he would just talk, and he would ask advice. He never presupposed. He never pretended like, oh, I know what I'm doing and all. He just blended. He just chatted with people, and he was always concerned about making other people feel at home, which was neat considering he wasn't from there. And so him kind of assimilating into the local town was 10 times more effective than people who should have, if you hear a Nova Scotian and a Newfoundlander side by side, you should almost think they're identical. But you hear somebody from Nova Scotia and somebody from Wales, you're going to know the difference. So it was all about how these people approached their town. When I talk about in my poverty mindset presentation, there's this life hack. I don't know why they call it that, but you'll see these memes on Instagram all the time, and they say, they attribute the quote to Will Smith. I don't think it was truly from Will Smith, but maybe it was. And they say the ultimate life hack is to move out of your hometown, because it shocks your brain into realizing, wow, guess what? Things weren't as good as I thought they were. And, it is what it is. And so when I encourage people to move away, and I'm not saying that I'm telling you, hey, go home, tell your wife you're moving tomorrow, but for us, that's what worked. I need you to know that it's not always going to be smooth sailing, at least not right away. So look, I'm going to share with you, and this is some of the things I've seen over the years that we've experienced ourselves. And then I'm also going to tell you some of the things that I have done and seen done that helped us assimilate into a community just a little bit better. And I want you to coach everything that I tell you tonight in the idea that no matter what, you may never fully fit into a community. And that's okay. You need to know how much of a community you want to become part of. You also need to know if you're ever going to pull the plug and move away from a community. But the first thing is there's going to be a bunch of stress involved, okay? So I always remember, again, there was this big movement many, many moons ago of people from away buying properties down on the islands. And the islands are as redneck as they come. And basically all they have down there was one little convenience store. And it was an hour's drive, 2 ferry rides to get to the closest Walmart. And these people would get down there and they would buy property and spend an exorbitant amount of money. And all they would ever do is bitch about how long it took to get somewhere, how expensive everything was, and how there was nothing there for them. And if you spend your entire time tearing down other people in the communities they've lived in your entire life, and you've come from away, you're not doing yourself any favors. However, even if you do everything right, it's still going to be stressful because you're not going to know anybody. And you might try to reach out, you might take a chance. And again, some people may just not like you at first, and that's okay. But there's going to be stress involved in moving to a new community. And you're like, yeah, I know that, Tim. Everybody knows it, but you don't really know it until you come home and you have a conversation with your wife and she's like, I just hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it because the women don't like me. They talk about me behind my back. Nobody will wave to me when we're out driving, whatever it is. But it is more stressful, at least up front, than you might think it will be. People are going to judge you. They're not going to trust you. Trust isn't built overnight. Judgment is. Judgment happens all the time, and you're different. You're going to be different than everybody else. You're probably going to talk a little different. You're going to sound a little different. You're going to look a little different. You're not going to know all the ins and the outs, and people are going to absolutely judge you. expect it, embrace it, move on from it. Backwood says, I'm now part of my town zoning board because people in town whose ancestors started the town asked me to join because I hold the same values as keeping a small town small. Felt nice. Yes, that right there, Backwoods. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but that's what happens. You take your time, you build your connections, and then you start working your way in. I put this one here because this one touched close to home. You may never get elected to politics in your hometown. Now, Backwoods Butcher's on that. He's on that committee. For me, I ran for town council. I'm so glad I didn't get elected. But when it came down to it, I was told by many, many people, hey, you can try, but nobody from outside of this town have ever been elected before. So politics may not necessarily be the route you need to go to get involved in a small town. And if you overstep your bounds and try to run for politics right away, there was a lady who did that in my town last time, you're going to be looked down upon real quick, and people aren't going to like you. And like I said, no matter how hard you try when you move to a new town, and I wanted to get the negative shit out of the way first so we can move into some of the positive. There's going to be some things that you just don't have. You're not going to have those shared, the same shared experiences with us, walking on the beach when you were, 14 years old, throwing rocks into the water. Or, one thing when everybody moved to my town, people would say, oh, if you need to find something, just go out past the new Tim Hortons. Well, you know what? The new Tim Hortons is over 2 decades old now. And I realized when people moved to our town, they didn't have a sweet clue which Tim Hortons was the new one and the old one. It's that kind of little shit that just happens when you first get started. Food Forest says, I moved every 3 to 4 years from 2 till 35. It was weird always being from not there. And it's part of it. Backwood says it also helps that I'm the only reputable butcher in my area. My wife calls me a celebrity. I love that our wives build us up. Isn't that great? So if you think about when you've started working at a new job, this is very similar. Now, the thing is that for the most part, sliding into a work community is a lot faster than sliding into a new town or village that you're moving into. However, the principles are the same. So let's go through some of the things that I have seen over the years that have kind of helped. And here's the thing. I personally think I'm really good at blending in with other communities. I'm really good at putting people at ease, making people comfortable, and becoming friends with people. I've been that way my entire life. But our town, when we moved here, was just a hard nut to crack. One more thing I wanted to share is, and here's the give and take. So we're talking about moving out of the city. The larger the community, the easier it can be to blend in, but that doesn't mean you're becoming part of the community. So if you've got a town of 10,000, 20, 30, 40,000, whatever it happens to be, you can probably just keep your nose down and not worry about it, but you're not becoming part of the community. You're just background noise. And in our town, it was 2,500 people, but one of the biggest problems in my town, where I live now, is that it's an oil patch town and it's transient. And so people come and go constantly. They come for a year, 2 years work and leave, and they just disappear overnight. And that's where the real hardness in the town came from. They were very hesitant to accept new people because new people always move away. So why should we bother? Letty Lou says, we've been in our small town for 2 years and are finally starting to make connections. We're not part of the community yet, but we're on our way. Love it. We're going to talk about that. So first off, give more than you take. Help in any way you can. Don't be overbearing, but do what you can. If you're the type that makes homemade stuff like jams and jellies, go around and give a jar to your neighbors. Or, if you know somebody who is into gardening, offer them, transplants from your plants, or, slips from your trees, or apples from your, whatever it happens to be, but give more than you can take. In any way you can, give. Because if even once you're looked at as a taker in a small town, you'll probably be labeled that for the rest of your life. And on top of that, not just giving more than you take, but give without the expectation of return. Something that took me a while in my town to understand, and this was kind of weird, but in my hometown where I grew up, and these are some of the unlisted, or not unlisted, that's the wrong word, but unspoken rules, that kind of thing. unwritten rules. That's the term you're looking for, Tim. In my hometown, it was very common to just, hey, can you give me a hand? Yep, I'll come by and give you a hand. And nobody ever kept account of it. You would just, if somebody needed help with moving something, you'd go and help them with the truck. And then the next time you would go and, I don't know, pull weeds in somebody's garden for them. Whatever it was, you just get together and do it. There was no accounting of it. When I moved to the town I live in now, everything was run like a ledger. So if I help you, I need to pay you for that. If you help me, you need to pay me for that right then and there. And that's how it works. And I realized really quickly that if you don't do that, you'll get looked at as a taker or somebody who's not part of the community. That's just the way of life. And I enjoy that better because there's never this, you never feel out of, you never feel indebted to anybody because your debts are always paid. You never owe one to somebody. So, you know, give with the expectation of return, but know some of the rules. We're going to talk about that, but don't try too hard. I talk about the Randalls. They were the family that moved to my hometown, and they tried way too hard. They would holler like, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" Oh, you know, and they'd walk up to you at Tim Hortons and pretend like you're their best friend. And people would, as soon as they turned their back, they'd be like, "Who's that? What? Why should I know him?" And people would look down upon them because of it. Joker Lee says, only thing that sucks about that is when your offers to help are roundly, soundly, and at times rudely rejected out of hand. That comes as well. It does. But you offered and move on. And if you find somebody who's an absolute dick, don't waste any time on them. You just need to find one or two people who will accept your help in a good sense, right? John Palmer says, I'm horrible about putting myself out there, just so introverted. And I'm going to say that's going to be a lot harder for people who absolutely struggle with introvertedness. Yeah, being an introvert anyway, because if you are 100% introverted, you're just going to want to curl up, watch Netflix, do your thing, and just ignore everybody else because it's way easier. And Backwood says, my wife had a real hard time when we moved out here. She's not the person to go out and meet people, and I'm the person that will pull into your driveway and knock on your door to say hi. And I'm also going to put it out there, and, you know, get ready to send me a hate email. But in my personal experience, it is much more difficult for women to acclimatize to a new community than it is for men. I've seen it firsthand, and you can call me a liar if you want to, but it just seems to be the way that women interact with one another and the way that men interact with one another. And I don't know if it's because men are just really surface level and we're like, you know, I don't know. And of course, you can always point to the exceptions to the rule. I get it, but I've seen it happen. Become part of the infrastructure. So like what Kyle was talking about, you know, you may not be able to run for town council, but you might be able to get on the building committee, that sort of thing. One step closer. This is a good one. I didn't have this in my notes. Walking your dog is a great way to meet the neighbors. Yes. Robin, you are 100% right. And you don't ever worry about getting preachy. I'm cool with anybody, but she says, without getting preachy, church, find a good church and be available for their events. 100%. That's part of it. And if I didn't put church or community, I might have put community groups later on in my notes, but if I didn't, remember that, because yes, it's true. Backwood says, when I'd introduce her to friend's wife, she'd call it a play date. Yeah, you know, sometimes us as men, we need to do the manly thing and get out there and, you know, step out and try to bring people together, right? Letty says, I finally shared names with a mom at Storytime today. We've been talking for a year. Good for you, Letty. I'm proud of you. Okay, here's an example from the past. So I grew up in a town called Digby, but where we owned our last house was down Digby Neck in a very small cove community, something that is very difficult to infiltrate as an outsider. Now, I wasn't completely an outsider because I went to school with a lot of the people that lived down there, and I was from the surrounding community. But one thing that really helped me was early on, as I was getting to know my neighbor better, I said, hey, are you guys ever looking for help on the lobster boat? And that is some of the hardest work in the world. And I went out and I helped them on the lobster boat. I went out and helped them haul traps in with no expectation of pay in that instance. And paying your dues was great. Doing some of the shit stuff, taking the low on the totem pole jobs or helping out with the things that most people don't want to help with will go a long way with introducing you to a local community. Be respectful. LOL shared this on Telegram, said be respectful of your neighbors and their property. That means not being a bad dog parent. Don't let your dog shit on your neighbor's lawn. Or worse than that, don't be like my former uncle. His neighbor used to take their dog shit in their backyard, pick it up with a shovel, and then throw it over my uncle's hedge into his hot tub. So don't be a bad neighbor. Be respectful. If you move, here's the thing, guys. If you move to a new house and your neighbor is used to walking across your backyard, or their tree limbs are over on your property, even though you have the legal right to trim the branches, go and talk to them first. Try to smooth things out without being a dick about it, right? 100%. Be friendly, even if others aren't. Who mentioned that earlier? Jokerlees, yes. You did your part. You can only control what you do. So again, being approachable, going out walking your dog, whatever it happens to be, is a really good way of getting out there, but being friendly, okay? Here's the one that worked super well for me. Work hard on your next door neighbor. Here's the thing. You don't have to get friendly with everybody in the town. You just have to get really friendly with one or two people. And if you can make your next door neighbor, quote unquote, fall in love with you, or at least become really good friends to the point where you can do the Tim and Wilson thing where you talk over the back fence all the time, that's going to be your in. So spend your energy on getting friendly with your neighbor, because you got to live there no matter what. And, Stephen Harris always used to say that it's going to be easier to feed your neighbor than to shoot them. But yeah, there you go. Lone Canadian, speaking of shooting. Hey, bud, he's don't shoot in their general direction. That's always a start, even though it's tempting sometimes. Yes. But yeah, work hard on your next door neighbor. And here's the thing. If you buy a house that's not on a corner lot, you're probably going to have two neighbors. And if you live in a fairly compact town, you could end up having three, because you might have a back alley neighbor as well. But work hard on them. Get to know them. Do everything you can to help them out, because okay, here I am. I have no idea what happened. I think somebody must have just unplugged the Wi-Fi from the hotel. So I'm going to finish up this episode on my phone. Can you guys hear me okay? If somebody can, then Give me a thumbs up out there. I hope you can. I see we still have 12 people in here, so I have no idea what just happened there, guys, and I apologize, but I just completely lost my signal. And yeah, okay, so let's finish up here for you. And I apologize to anybody who's listening on the audio of this because yeah, we're going to the audio quality is going to take a big hit. So let's finish up. Got to be a prepper. 2 is 1, 1 is none, right? So where were we at here? Don't judge, guys. Here's the thing. Even if you think rodeos are stupid, don't tell people you think rodeos are stupid. One of the things that happened to me many years ago when I was working at the farm store, I made a joke and I said, you know what the quickest way to turn money into shit is? Buy a horse. And there was a rancher over there who did not appreciate that joke at all. I was judging. Even though I thought I was being funny, I realized I was shitting on something that was really important to local people. So don't do it. You know, even if you think fishermen are dumb, don't say it. Don't judge people because you just don't know. People are going to be the way they are. Every town has its things that are important to them. So don't judge. Try new things. Don't be afraid to try new things, right? You know, go and help out. See if you've got a friend that is into farming and you haven't done it before. Go and process some cattle with them. You know, find out how to castrate calves, that sort of thing, right? But get involved in the things that you need to try out that you can, but don't judge. Even if in your brain you're like, man, that's dumb. Don't judge people because if you do that, that is the quickest way to get ostracized. Learn the local vocabulary, but don't overdo it, okay? Yeah, Backwoods says don't judge in public. Exactly, that's what I mean. So don't judge in public, but learn the local vocabulary. So when I first moved to my town, turns out that in that little tiny corner of Canada, they call hoodies bunny hugs. I don't know what the hell, where that came from, but they do. And so you need to know that. But also, you know, don't just adopt terminology that you don't know and you're just going to end up sounding like an idiot. But just become familiar with the local vocabulary. It'll help just a little bit. Here's the next one, and this is probably the single tip that has helped me more than anything when it comes to getting ingrained in a community. And it is bunny hug. Lone Canadian says bunny hugs is a Saskatchewan terminology. And in my town, it is right on the border. So that's where we get. And you know what? I need to, Lone Canadian says don't judge even in private because it will prejudice your attitude in public. You're right. And that's a good point because yes, even if you judge in your head, try to get rid of that shit if you can, right? This is the one that I absolutely think helps me the most wherever I go. And it is be genuinely interested in people and the places where you come from. Now, here's the thing. You can't fake that. You can develop it over time, but just be that guy that wants to hear about other people. Whenever you meet someone, ask them how they're doing. I am not kidding when I say I could sit and listen to other people tell me their story all day long. And I also like to know the history of a place that I'm living. So do that, guys. Figure out, just listen. Just say, hey, how are you doing? Tell me about your day. What are you up to? But be genuinely interested in other people, and it will make your life a lot better. Now, this I pulled off of a website. I forgot to link where I found it, so I apologize. But they give two. They said, ask for advice, not labor, but give labor and not advice. And I thought that was so good. This was on a website talking about how to join into a work community a lot quicker. But people love it when you ask them for advice because it doesn't cost them anything to give it to you. And it shows that you respect the other person. But if you ask them, hey, can you help me lift this or lift that? Then all of a sudden you're asking them for something that costs them something. And then you're looked at as a taker. But give labor. Always be the guy that, you know, if you're new at church, help stack up the chairs when they need to put them away on Sunday. Whatever it is. If you're at a school event, help stack the chairs. Or, as much as I don't like it, volunteer in the canteen at the arena or at the school, even though you might not want to. But keep your mouth shut when it comes to advice, because if you're the type that gives unsolicited advice, That's a sure way to get in the shit book right there. Remember, you're going to be lonely for a while. It's okay. Don't become homebound. Those are two things I was talking about before. Backwood says, I love listening to people. You get a glimpse of the movie of their life. Yes. And Stephen King talks about people as the background characters in your personal story. And that's what they are. And they may just pop in and pop out of your life. But you know what's cool? Finding out their story is going to build you up as well. And I love it. And he says, some movies are garbage and it's okay to walk out of them. Yeah. Dude, where's my car? I walked into that one many years ago. And if you're telling me a story like that, I probably would. Shoot the shit, guys. Whenever you meet somebody, it doesn't have to be a deep theological conversation or anything. Just sit and chat about things. Simple as that. Two more that I love. Hardware stores, feed stores are great places to meet people who are willing to talk to you. They might argue with you in a good sense, but that's the type of place. And also, the old fellas that sit around at the coffee joint, drinking coffee, they're great to talk to too. They're going to be the ones that can kind of give you an in on what the town's like. And here's the thing, senior citizens are always looking for somebody to talk to. I got invited the other day. I was up to Subway and the old timers were in there, and I joke with them every time I go in. Like, hey, sit down and chat with me. And if I'd had more time, I would have. But those are two places where it's pressure free to chat with other people. And probably the final thing is, don't try to make it like where you came from. Remember, embrace that. Don't talk about the differences all the time about where you came from. But if you do talk about the differences, talk about them in a positive light. Like, hey, I love that you guys do this. Don't be, oh, I wish it were like that, right? And then people, the more you talk to other people, the more they're going to want to hear about where you came from. And then you're going to start building shared experiences and some things like that. Joker Lee says, yeah, I usually make jambalaya biscuits for big projects myself. Yeah, there you go. And Backwood says, anywhere my wife goes in town, she says, she has to say, I'm Kyle's wife to get the better customer service. That's what Becky does, and that's what the girls do at school too, so it's okay. But embrace the differences. Set yourself, if you're moving into a new town, set yourself a goal of, I'm gonna make significant connection with 2 people. I'm gonna have significant conversations with a dozen people, and then force yourself to do it. You're gonna have to get out of your comfort zone. It's not what you're designed to do. It's not where you came from. Don't try to make it like it's where you came from. Embrace the differences. Embrace the good shit. Ignore the bad shit. Figure out the unwritten rules. Spend time getting to know one person really well, and they'll help get you connected just a little bit better. But always remember, do you guys remember, I don't know if you ever seen the movie Hotel Rwanda? Don Cheadle, I think, is the main character in it. And he did everything he could to do favors for everybody. He always was doing favors for all the different people coming and going. And you know what? When he needed help, they helped him up until a point. But eventually, they took care of themselves. And that's kind of how I look at this. You move into a new town, do everything you can to make connections in that community. Do everything you can. But when it comes down to it, you're going to look after your neighbors up until a point. And I don't mean this in a negative sense at all, but always remember that when it comes down to it, your family unit is going to be the thing that you absolutely look for. But what you want is to find a community that you can fit into enough that you can help weather storms as a community. Because if the shit ever goes completely sideways, then yeah, it's probably going to be you and your family eventually. But do everything you can to become part of that community. Because here's the thing, everything we do in prepping should make your life better, whether the shit hits the fan or not. And if you're doing something simply because something bad might happen someday, then you might as well have stayed in the town you lived in. But if you're going to move to a town to better your life, to better your family's life, then you need to embrace it and you need to make your life better today so that the next 20 years between now and whatever might or might not happen, remember that, will be better for you. Because you don't want to just hop on a plane with no money in your pocket and fly all the way to Alberta simply because maybe you should. And you don't want to go there to be miserable. And you don't want to go there, even though you wanted to make, you wanted to make more money for your family. Boy, that would have been pretty bad if this last decade had been an absolute shit show for us. Now, it wasn't perfect, but you know what? we've enjoyed the hell out of the life we've lived out here. So you need to embrace it. It needs to make your life better today, tomorrow, and every day. But that doesn't mean you're not going to be uncomfortable, and it doesn't mean you're not going to feel shitty for a while. And it also doesn't mean that you're not going to want to tuck tail and go back home like we did many, many years ago when we moved to Saskatchewan. So remember that. And guys, if you want to share your tips in the Telegram group with me, I'm sure, especially if you're listening to this on audio, Letty Lou says embrace the suck. That's it, because that's what you have to do. There's good, there's bad. But the thing is, what I usually find is to find the good, you got to go through a whole bunch of shit along the way. You got to embrace it up front, and it'll pay off in the end. It's like investing, right? So I appreciate you. Thanks for sticking with me. I don't think I lost anybody while it died. I still have no clue where the friggin' Wi-Fi went. Maybe I should have just, I don't know, maybe did I don't even remember what you call it, like the booster off my phone instead, right? But whatever. I did it. We're here. We made it through this episode. Anybody who's listening to the audio, stick with it. I appreciate you. I couldn't edit out that the little dead section because I don't have it on my laptop. So with that, guys, here's the thing. A couple other things. There won't be I don't think there'll be another live until middle of next week. That's why I wanted to get tonight out of the way for you as well. I wanted to get you one more live episode tomorrow. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm going to be at Prepper Camp in Saluda, North Carolina. I'm going to see some of my best friends in the entire world. I am just blessed, not lucky, because we've done this, Becky and I, but to have the ability to travel around and go to these incredible events and see you guys, this community. I love you. And in the words of John Palmer, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.